Story 12. My longtime girlfriend asked for an open relationship before agreeing to marry me. My 26 male longtime girlfriend, 26 female, have been together since our senior year in high school. We were friends before dating and grew into a relationship during our senior year. We both went to a local community college since we are both from modest middle-income families. Julie and I lived with our respective parents during college and found an apartment after getting jobs. We had lived together for over a year when I asked Julie to marry me. Our lives were good, and we were both in great jobs at companies we liked. When I asked her to marry me, we were in the city at a nice restaurant after spending the day hitting all the city's major sites. We were at a rooftop restaurant that was highly rated and very expensive. I had planned ahead and gotten a window seat so we could watch the sunset. Julie was a little taken aback and told me she loved me, but asked that we hold off on the engagement since she wanted to talk to me about our future. She suggested that we wait until we get back to the apartment. I was freaked out because she didn't say yes. Stunned was probably a better word. Julie and I had spoken multiple times about our future, and we both openly discussed what it would be like when we married. We discussed kids and careers. Julie told me she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom until the kids entered school. After her comment, I barely spoke to her, and things got quiet and awkward. I waved the waiter over and paid for the bill. Julie looked a little upset that I wanted to leave, but I wasn't in the mood to just act like everything was okay. Julie tried to get me to chat with her during the ride home with small talk about everything that came to mind. I just sat and listened, and didn't respond. When we finally returned to the apartment, she exited the car and closed the door, expecting me to get out too. As soon as her door closed, I backed out and drove away. She started spamming me with texts that turned into her calling me, but I just ignored it and drove to my parents' house. My mom was in bed, but my dad was still awake, working in the garage. When I pulled into the driveway, the garage door was open, and he walked out to meet me as I got out of the car. I had told my parents that I was proposing that night, so the fact that I showed up at the house alone clued him in that it hadn't gone well. As soon as I got out of the car, he asked if I was okay, and I just nodded. He didn't ask about the proposal. He just motioned me to come into the house. He went in to get my mom, who was still awake, lying in bed on her phone. We all sat around the table, and I told them what Julie had said. Dad just nodded and said he was sorry to hear that. On the other hand, my mom looked annoyed and told me to ensure that I looked after myself in conversations with Julie. My phone was still vibrating with texts and calls, and my parents kept looking down at the phone. Mom finally asked if I was going to get that. I said no and asked if I could stay in my room that night. They both said that I didn't need to ask, and Mom gave me a big hug. Dad told me to not let it get to me and remember to be a good and honorable man. I got up, showered, and headed to work the next day. I was a bit overdressed from the previous night, which made some people curious, but I kept my focus on work until it was time to go home. Julie stood there waiting for me when I pulled up to our apartment parking space. I thought that was strange until I remembered that we shared our location. She knew I was home last night, and I had gone to work today. I exited the car, walked past her, into the apartment, and sat on the couch. I ignored her questions, and she attempted to get me to talk to her. She was standing there going off on me about dumping her at the apartment and bailing last night, so I interrupted her and asked her to lay out her expectations for our future to be, using her words from the previous night. She got an annoyed look and then paused like she was trying to phrase the next comments correctly. Julie then dropped the bombshell that she loved me, but thought that since we'd only really dated each other since high school, we should take a break to ensure we both wanted this. She then started about how taking a few months to validate our feelings seemed like common sense before committing ourselves to a forever relationship. I sat there sort of perplexed about what she was trying to say when it dawned on me that she was asking for an open relationship for a few months. I asked her if she meant an open relationship, and she again paused and said that was an imperfect description, but said if I wanted to describe it like that, it was fine. We just sat there in silence for a while until I asked her why. She started with a very polished explanation of the benefits, like she'd been practicing this for a while. I stood up, looked her in the eyes, and said, "So you want the option to go out with other people to see if you are missing something?" Julie started getting upset and told me it wasn't like she planned to go out and replace me. I just stood there until it got awkward again and then asked her, "Are you sure about this?" Julie took a few seconds, then looked at me and said, "Yes, I think this would be good for both of us." I said, "Okay, if that's what you want, but I will never ask you to marry me again. You are free to explore your life." And walked into the bedroom, shutting the door. I could tell she stood outside the door for a long time. A while later, Julie left the apartment, and I heard her get into her car and drive off. I sent a text to my dad and mom explaining what Julie said, and my mom replied, "Get all of your stuff and come home." My dad said he'd be over with the truck in 20 minutes. He showed up on time with my mom in tow, and we spent the next couple of hours packing my stuff into the truck. I left all the furniture except for a small table and a wall mirror that was given to me by my parents. I cleaned the apartment while my dad and mom drove my stuff back home. We didn't have any shared accounts other than the apartment lease. I handwrote a note that said she would need to renew the utilities under her name and that I would continue paying half the rent. I left the apartment for the last time. Julie lost her mind when she came home that night, and I was gone. She spam called my phone to the point I had to shut it off, and I had hundreds of text messages. I changed my status to single on social media, then commented, "Life sucks when you're in love 1 minute and single the next." The next day, one of my friends asked what was happening because his girlfriend, who works with Julie, said she had hooked up with a guy from work the night before. I just stood there looking at the text. I asked him if he could get more detail and please send it to me. It took a couple of hours for him to forward some pictures his girlfriend got from a coworker who had seen her at a bar. There were pictures of them kissing, and another with them sitting right next to each other, arms around each other. Apparently, their relationship was the talk of their office. The kicker was a screenshot of a text conversation between Lori and the actual AP asking him what the scoop was with Julie. The guy said that Julie had broken up with her boyfriend, so she wanted to celebrate. She asked if they were dating, and he said, "Hell no," commenting about her just being a hookup. He even said she was the worst lay he'd ever had and had wasted so much time on her. He didn't make the connection that Julie and Lori were friends. A few days later, Julie was at my work. I was called by the receptionist saying Julie was here to see me. I had been waiting for this, so I pulled out the printed copies of the text conversations and walked out to the reception desk to find Julie standing there with another one of her coworkers. As soon as she saw me, she came to me begging to know why I was not replying to her. I looked at her friend, then back at Julie and said, "You insisted on an open relationship and then went out and screwed AP that same night. That's not an open relationship. You're just a cheater." Her friend gasped and looked at Julie as she started to freak out, not knowing I knew what happened. I threw the printed copies of the texts at her and went back through the security door. That night, Julie showed up at my house, and my mom stopped her from coming in. I went out and spoke to her again on the front porch with my parents standing there as witnesses. My mom was making a video of the conversation. Julie was a wreck and just stood there crying so violently she could barely speak, repeating how sorry she was. I let her go on for a while and finally asked her why she needed another guy and why I wasn't good enough. My mom interrupted and answered for her, saying it was because she was a horrible person. Then Mom said she hoped never to see her again. Julie just stared at my mom in horror at what she said. Julie looked at me with her mouth open, trying to find what to say. I let her say everything she wanted and then simply asked her what she expected from me. I said that I was confused since she was free to date or be intimate with anyone she wanted to from the minute she broke up with me for her open relationship. It took her a minute to piece together what I said, and she broke down again. I told her that I loved her deeply. I do. I told her I needed some time to myself to get over her. I told Julie it was my time to explore outside of this relationship and to please not bother me anymore. She started screaming and grabbed onto me and wouldn't let me go. My mom had to call Julie's parents and tell them they needed to come over and get her. Our families had connected over the years. They'd been to our house before for dinner and holidays. When Julie's dad got to the house, Julie was holding me, sobbing, still trying to get me to forgive her. Her dad walked up and asked what was going on. I told him the truth and said that Julie had cheated on me, sleeping with one of her coworkers. Her dad pulled Julie off of me and asked if that was true. Julie just stood there crying. I told her dad I proposed to her a few nights ago, and she rejected me and threw me out like the trash for some guy she just met at work. I told him I wouldn't be seeing Julie anymore. I also told him I had moved out of the apartment and was happy to pay the penalty for breaking the lease. Her dad said, "No, you don't owe her that. She made this mess and will be responsible for cleaning it up." Julie finally admitted to her dad that after talking to her friends in AP, she was excited to step out and try something new. When I asked how that went, she got quiet and said, "You read the texts, so please stop being mean." Her dad just interrupted and said, "Answer him." She started crying again and said that he was only after a chance to use her for a hookup. She said that after starting, she got cold feet and started feeling ashamed of what she was doing, so she just laid there until he was finished and then left. I told Julie that she had hurt me more than any person in the world, and I hated her for what she had done. Julie started pleading with me again, and I told her that the fact she told her AP she had broken up with me and she was single was like being stabbed in the back. I was yelling at her now, saying the fact that she had so selfishly disregarded my feelings and destroyed so many years of love for some random guy she had just met meant she really didn't love me and probably never had. Julie was on her feet doing some sort of half scream, half cry. She was wailing at the top of her lungs and was starting to hyperventilate. Her dad took her hand and urged her to calm down. Julie collapsed, sobbing on her knees. After a few minutes, I knelt, kissed Julie on the top of her head, nodded to her dad, and closed the door on that part of my life. As I looked out the window, the last time I saw Julie was her dad carrying her to his car. She still reaches out to me every few days, trying to break through the barrier I've put up. It's hard to imagine a life without Julie, but I won't be a doormat for anyone. I might update if anything interesting happens. I hope not, and I'd love to just fade away to find happiness, but my mom vowed to send Julie a wedding invitation when I do find my life partner. God, I hope she's not kidding. Was that my out loud voice? I only post unique new content. Please like and subscribe.